Our New Testament lesson today is from the book of Hebrews, chapter 11. And it's going to be printed, what is printed is not correct. So we'll be reading from chapter 11, verse 29 through chapter 12, verse 2. It's the faith of the Israelite heroes and the example of Jesus Christ, our Savior. By faith, the people passed through the Red Sea as if it were dry land. But when the Egyptians attempted to do so, they were drowned. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell after they had been encircled for 7 days. By faith, Rahab the prostitute did not perish with those who were disobedient, because she had received the spies in peace. And so what more should I say? For time would fail me to tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, of David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, obtained promises, shut the mouths of lions, quenched raging fire, escaped the edge of the sword, won strength out of weakness, become mighty in war, even put foreign armies to flight. Women received their dead by resurrection. Others were tortured, refusing to accept release in order to obtain a better resurrection. Still others suffered mocking and flogging and even chains and imprisonment. Some of our faith ancestors were stoned to death. They were sawn in two. They were killed by the sword. They went about in skins of sheep and goats, destitute, persecuted, tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts and mountains and in caves and holes in the ground. Yet all these, though they were commended for their faith, did not receive what was promised, since God had provided something better, so that they would not, apart from us, be made perfect. Therefore, since we're surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin that clings so closely. And let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the pioneer and the perfecter of our faith, who for the sake of the joy that was set before him endured the cross, disregarding its shame, and has taken his seat at the right hand of the throne of God. These are the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
People are always asking me why. Why do the same thing every year? Why not move on? But I say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Johnny?
Present. I'm comfortable. I know the routine.
United States of America, and to the republic.
And I don't want to brag, but I'm pretty popular around here. I do really well in sports.
No, not my house.
Well, I'm just very successful here. Why would I go and mess that up by graduating?
B.
But boat.
I mean, in the first grade, I may not know all the answers.
D. Dog. E.
The hours are longer. I hear they don't even have nap time. I mean, I just don't see the upside. Then first grade leads to second grade, second to third.
It's really good.
Then you're in high school reading boring books with no pictures.
3, 4, 5.
But he was
Still hungry.
Next thing you know, people expect you to get a job and give up summer vacation. No, sir. I think I found my niche. Thank you very much. Home sweet kindergarten. Besides, I mean, what if I failed first grade? How humiliating would that be? Nope, just don't think I could handle that kind of embarrassment.
E. I owe you. And sometimes letter Y too.
That was not a good choice. Very disappointed.
Well, thank goodness we don't have any folks like that around here, right? Our faith is something we get to continue to mature and grow in. Hopefully, we're maturing and growing in it. It reminds me of a fella in his 70s who asked me one day, I've been going since I was a child. When do I finally get to graduate from Sunday school? And I don't think we ever do. We're always growing. Thinking about maturity and growing in our faith and knowing that each of us has faith that's been given to us from others and passed on to us. And thinking about how we celebrate that, I was reminded of how in 1984, the Olympics were in Los Angeles. Part of, in preparation for the Olympics that year, was that the Olympic torch, the flame that came all the way from Greece on Mount Olympia, was carried across the United States by runners. It was one of my great privileges in life to be one of those runners. This is the torch that I carried in 1984, and being one of those runners to help carry it across Oklahoma. What was interesting about that moment is it was one of great responsibility, of great joy. Whenever I stood there with this torch, waiting the runner to come and bring it, it was really a moment of excitement. And then to hold the torch over and to light it from his, and then to carry it my portion of the way, making sure I didn't fall, making sure it didn't go out, all those things, making sure I got it to the right location, and then to pass it on to the next person. In our own life and faith, we each have received faith from those who come before us, those who taught us and have brought us to this place in our life. And we have in this moment the amazing gift and responsibility to carry that faith in our life today. And then to be ready to pass it on to the next one. Hopefully we're doing that always. We're always passing the faith on to others. But what I want to do, we're going to pass this around, and if I want you to hold it and kind of experience what it's like to hold the flame. But as you do, and it makes its way to you, I want you to think about who those people were in your life who taught you Christian faith, who passed the faith on to you. And then as it comes and you hold it, think of what it is that God has done and how blessed your life is for the faith that you're able to have and hold today. And then as you pass it on to your neighbor in the pew or in the pew behind you, I want you to think about who it is God's calling you in your life to be passing the flame of faith to. We're going to start it here. One of the youth's going to come down and help us to get it up to the balcony, and another help us get it back down on this side, and Jennifer up to the choir, and then back all the way around. So hopefully by the end of the sermon we can get this passed around. So it means you can hold it for a moment, but don't dwell on it. You got to get it passed off to the next person too. I got to tell you, my life has been one it's been blessed. I've had a lot of amazing opportunities in my life, and carrying the torch was one of those. I grew up as someone who, we used to just watch all of the Olympics as any time it was on in our family. We'd watch every bit of it we could. We'd stop, of course, to go to church and work and school, all those kinds of things, but it was always a part of our lives. And growing up at the YMCA in our activity, I just always knew I would be an Olympian in some way. So having that privilege to be one of those who got to help was amazing. But as amazing as that was, it really doesn't compare to the gift I have in my life to every day have the flame of Christ in my own life. That others have taken the time, have made sure that faith was important to me, that was a part of my very life. That was amazing, to have people who've been a part of my life to pass that faith on to me. And the privilege that I have to be able to help share faith, a connection to the love of God in each one of our own lives, and to be able to share that with others, I could give away all of those trophies and treasures because of how much joy it brings and the excitement as not only as a pastor, but just as a person of faith. That Christ has done so much for me, and I understand that, and I'm able to share a bit of God's love with others. It's remarkable. It's a remarkable thing. As we pass that torch around, one of the things you'll notice on it, it has three phrases that are in Latin: Altius, Sidius, Fortius, higher, stronger, faster. I may not have gotten the order right for the Latin, so excuse me if I didn't. But higher, stronger, and faster. That's the motto for the modern Olympic Games. But in a way, it applies to our own faith, doesn't it? A faith that's higher, a faith that's stronger, a faith that's faster, to reach out to others in love and care. Think about who those people are who passed faith on to you. People who were integrated into your own life. So I look at that picture in 1984 when I was carrying it. Coach, you see, back there was my baseball coach in the gray jacket or shirt, Coach Dewhurst. He coached some amazing ball players in his career, one of them being Darryl Porter, another Mickey Tetherton. I wasn't one of those great ones he coached. I was a good player. But, you know, he helped give and help shape the lives of so many young people, and he was one of those for me. Just right behind me in the striped shirt is my great Aunt Minnie. And there were every person there I can tell you stories about, because our lives were connected together. And in a way, as I carried it, it was kind of a carrying it on behalf of all those who were a part of my life and helped shape me. And each of us are that way in our faith. We have people, our parents, our grandparents, Sunday school teachers, pastors, ushers. I remember there was an usher in the church I grew up in. He told me after I'd become a minister, he said, you know, I never thought you'd make it. He said, I didn't know you'd make it through to adulthood, but you know, you used to come up here in the church and you'd kick me in the shins and run off as fast as you could, and never thought. And yet, in the way he helped shape my life, it made a difference. Sunday school teachers. Tom Hibbets was one of those. Tom had been a coach in high school, couldn't make enough money at it, he felt, and so he left and got into the insurance business. He was a great track coach, but never was involved in it. And at our high school, we didn't have much in terms of a program. And so Tom would come out to my races, and he would time me. And he would give me my splits on the mile and 2 mile and at the 3 mile. And then he would tell me how I could work to help get the time better. Tom was my Sunday school teacher, but in a way, he was my coach. He was a mentor for me. Each of us as adults have that role in the lives of the young people in this church. As we celebrate the Promotion Sunday this morning, and they come up here, each one of them are kids that we can have an impact on their lives. We can help shape who they are. We can help them to understand that in their own lives, they've been given a faith. We can pass the faith that we've been given on to them. And it can make all the difference in who they are. We were given the faith, and we hold it. We hold it now. And that's a sacred responsibility, something not to be taken too lightly. And we can do that sometimes. I'll go to church this week, or we won't go next week, or maybe we'll be involved in Sunday school, maybe not, or maybe we will seek out people to help encourage in their life and faith. It's not a maybe thing. This is something that God has given to us and placed in our life, and we ought to take such great joy out of the responsibility that we can't wait to find ways to encourage the faith in others and to re-strengthen our faith week by week as we participate in the life of the church. It's a sacred responsibility. I want to tell you about a pastor, the kind of pastor that if we had in our lives, we would know we'd be able to make it. He wasn't one of those who doesn't make appointments, doesn't visit. He was one who came, one who did everything he could. He had a responsibility to help save a church. That's a tough thing to do. The church that he writes to in our lesson this morning, the letter of Hebrews, it's really not a letter. This is a heavy thing. Some of the letters in the New Testament, if you imagined them, you just put a regular stamp on and mailed. But this is not one of those. This is one of those you have to put extra stamps on because it's heavy. It's weighty. It's one where he's pulling everything he can to help save a church, to renew the life of a church, because they had gotten past the point where they had lost their joy. They had lost their joy, and that happens to us in our lives. There are times when we lose our joy, but the problem is this church was not down on its all fours looking for it. They were tired. They were ready to just rest. They had done it. They had done programs. They had tried to get everything going, and nothing seemed to work. They were just tired. Everything that they'd done, they'd tried, and it didn't seem to make much difference. The church is the church in Jerusalem. The congregation, in the early days, they celebrated with joy. But now, some of the first early ones were passing on. The little cemetery in back was beginning to fill up. They really were having a hard time finding their joy in life and in faith. We all know what that's like. The difference is they were giving up. And he was doing everything he could to encourage them. We do that in our lives. We bring in guest speakers. They'd done all that kind of stuff, and nothing seemed to work. Everything was just dead, not changing. And yet he would not give up, would not give up, would not give up. He was there and present with them and encouraging them every step of the way to keep this faith moving. He reminded them of all the great heritage that they had in their life. That's part of our scripture today. Remember all those who come before us? Remember how they carried the faith? Remember all that happened in their lives and all that they did? Those were amazing days. All of them carried the faith so that it might be brought to you. Some of them gave their lives for this faith. Did you hear it? Son and two? Man, that sounds rough. They went through a lot in order to have this sacred trust, this flame of faith to pass on to us in our lives, and that we get the privilege to carry. Isn't that amazing? God's love, God's grace, God's goodness full in our heart because of all that they've done. He says, you don't want to let them down, do you? All those who have been a part of making you who you are, of making this place who it is, you don't want to let them down because you've got a responsibility now. And then he looks to Jesus. Look to Jesus, the pioneer and the perfecter of our faith, one who gave everything for us. You don't want to let him down, do you? How amazing it is, this gift we have. Celebrate it, enjoy it, share it, because it's our sacred trust. Not just those who've gone before us, but those who are still yet to come. The people whose names we don't even know yet. Those that are still on the way, coming to the place of faith. You see, faith that he's calling them to is a faith that's different than just something we have. It's not something we hold. It's something we do. He's calling the church to a risk-taking faith, to step out where we don't see, where we don't understand. Christ has done all this for us, and our faith that we carry is not just something we hold. Now, I don't want to, on the beginning of the school year, start an argument with teachers. But faith should not be a noun. Faith should be a verb because it's an action. It's something we do. We do not hold faith, but we have faith, trust in one another and in God. That faith has been granted to us, and we get to carry it in our lives. A risk-taking faith that calls us forward that calls us to action, not just to sit and hold, but an action to go and to do. I pray that faith is that for you. Your faith is something that you live out in every day of your life, that you carry deep in your heart, that you know that relationship with God, and that it changes everything about how you live, about how you love, about how you care for life and the world. Whenever I was in high school, running was my sport, and I'd accomplished a little bit of success at it. But one of the original things that I learned was from a fella that was a competitor of mine. I grew up running at Southeast High School. He grew up running at Douglas High School. His father, I think, was kind of the grandfather of cross country in Oklahoma City. Kelly T. Fatiller was his name. And Kelly's dad, I don't even know his first name, Mr. T. Fatiller is all I knew. He was the coach at Classen High School, and he organized all the cross-country meets in Oklahoma City for a long period of time. One of the training methods that I learned from Kelly and his dad, and that we started at Southeast High School, was a training that they called an Indian run. I knew Kelly and his dad were Native American. I didn't know anything more than that. Later in life, I found out that he was Pawnee. Whenever I was stationed as a pastor in Pawnee, and they had the Warrior Run, and Kelly came home, hadn't been to Pawnee in years and years, but that first summer that I was there, he came home to run the Indian Run, and they were giving out the awards. Kelly was a gifted runner. He could do it naturally. Any success I had was hard work over and over again. Kelly, without any thinking, could get out there and do it. He hadn't run since our high school and college days, and we are now in our 30s, and he entered the race, finished third in it. I couldn't believe it, with all the people that were running. And afterwards, I talked to Kelly, and he told me his dad had passed away that year, and he'd always promised his dad he'd come back to do the Warrior Run, and he did that time, because it was part of his legacy. But that training method that they taught us, the Indian Run, was one that pushed every member of the team to do better. We would go out, and there were 8 of us on our team, and we would run with about 10 to 15 feet between us. So spread out by the time you get that, over about 100 feet. We would run 6 miles. And the person who was at the last, we would run at a nice steady clip, but the person who was at the last part of the line, it was their job to sprint out around until they fell 10 to 15 feet out in front of the lead runner. Then, once they fell into place, the new person at the end of the line did their sprint. It was one that worked on endurance and strength. It was one that built community among the team, because you didn't want to be the one who let the team down. Everybody did their part. And it let me know that even though running feels like an individual sport, it's something you do a part of a team. And I think there's a proper analogy there, that in faith, sometimes it feels like an individual activity, because it is about our relationship with God, and my relationship with God may be in some ways different than yours. My prayer life may be different. The way we read Scripture, the way we connect, the relationship each of us holds is an individual thing. And yet, we don't do it alone. We do it together, corporately. And it reminds us of our responsibility from those who have handed it off, and those who we live with in faith, and those who we pass it on to and get to carry the life of faith in their own. We do not run the course of faith alone. In fact, we run it with Jesus by our side. It's something that gives inspiration to us to be able to finish the course, to run the race that has been marked out for us. You might remember this lady, Corrie ten Boom. If you don't recognize the faith, you surely recognize her name, or the book that she wrote, The Hiding Place. She's a person of deep faith, and a person who, because of her faith that she'd carried in her life, led through times of helping to hide Jews in their home during World War II. It's a person who, through faith, had moved through so much difficulty of being imprisoned during that time. And then, having been set free, finding her way to the United States and being kind of overwhelmed by how much we had here and how we seem to take it so much for granted. The thing that she said about her life is that the one true hope that she had was that when she got to heaven, she would see people there who would say to her, if it hadn't been for you and your witness in your life, I'd have never been here. She understood that her faith was something that needed to be handed on, passed on to others. And we gained such inspiration from her. Maybe in a little different way, Carlisle Marney talked about all those who were a part of our own life and faith. Carlisle was a Southern Baptist pastor. He was at First University Church in Austin, Texas for many years. He was a little different than most Southern Baptist pastors. Just to give you an idea, this was a different era in the church, but he smoked. And that was often frowned upon. He didn't do it at church, but it wasn't unusual in that time period that some pastors smoked. And something he had picked up in the service and had a hard time getting rid of it. And one day after church, he was greeting folks as they were leaving and out on the steps in front. And one of the ladies in the church said, Dr. Marney, I just want you to know I'm praying for you. And he says, well, I appreciate that. What are you praying for? He said that God would teach you to stop smoking. He said, well, thank you. I want you to know I'm adding you to my prayer list also, and I'll be praying for you. He said, oh, well, thank you. That means so much. What will you be praying for? He says that God will teach you to mind your own business. He was a little different than some Baptist pastors I've known, but after serving there, maybe he needed a time of respite. He opened up what was called the Interpreter's House at Lake Junaluska. It's a United Methodist campground and beautiful lake in the southeast in the mountains, Smoky Mountains there. Gorgeous place. You got to stop by if you ever get the chance. He worked at the place that was called Interpreter's House, and he would teach, and he called it a place for burned out pastors. So that when pastors got to the place where they felt like they had poured it all out and there was not much else they could do, they would come and find a place of relief and respite. And they would come stay at the beauty of God's creation, and he would talk with them and work with them on issues that were going on in their own life and faith and the church, and help send them back renewed. Just one more Marney story so you kind of get the feel for who he was. One time a bishop had brought the district superintendents to come, and they were visiting with Carlisle, or Marney as everybody called him. And they were all sitting around, and it was late into the evening. And as they were sharing, Dr. Marney says to him, well, Bishop, I just wanted to know, are you all Methodists still all teaching your pastors to commit adultery? And they looked puzzled. They were shocked. They looked at each other. And, we don't know what you mean. And he said, well, I just wanted to know if you're still teaching your pastors to love the church more than their wives. That was a day when they were all men in ministry. He just wanted to find a way. He's always trying to get under your skin and find a way to get to the point. Are you teaching your pastors to love the church more than their wives? Shouldn't it be the other way around, maybe, he said. He liked to ask those kind of provoking questions. So when he described the Christian life as a house, you might imagine, he said, all our houses have a basement where the plumbing and the trash needs to go out and all those things are. You don't want to live in the basement. And yet some people choose to kind of live in that place. When you come up to the next floor, you live with the living rooms, and he was a Southerner through and through, and talked about that. And then he said, but out on, if you'll imagine, if you come out onto the lawn and you look back at the house, imagine a balcony there. And on the balcony are some old white rockers. And sitting in those rockers are all the people who have brought you to where you are today. Maybe your parents, maybe a coach, maybe people who have helped shape your life, maybe even people you never met, but you read their books, you heard their words, and it helped influence you. Maybe just imagine them all sitting there in the balcony, cheering you on. You never would have made it to where you are if these people hadn't been there and been a part of your life. That's your balcony. Those are the people you carry in your balcony. They're the ones who, whether we may not see it, are here in the empty places in the pews, worshiping God with us. And it's because of them that we have this connection and community and faith. Do you see their faces as you look around? Imagine them sitting here and with us today. We never would have been here if it hadn't been for what God had done in their lives and causing them to make a difference in our own. That's our balcony. And it ought to be packed full of people who have influenced us. But even maybe more important than that is the porch where we are responsible to come out and to share that faith with others, to be those who pass it on to other folks in their lives. Had a little trouble actually putting this one up. This last year made it a little tougher. I've used this story before in a sermon, but at Texas A&M, they call themselves the home of the 12th man. And many of you probably know the story about the 12th man. Some of you probably don't. For either of y'all, I'll tell it. The story is that in 1922, the football team was having a year that was leading toward a championship year. And in the first half, many of the players had gotten injured. In fact, they were down to the point of having only 11 healthy players. And so one of the people, he was a basketball player, King Gill, had been working as a scout with the team. And so the coach at halftime went up into the stands and got King Gill to come down. And they put him into a uniform and had him ready. So the whole of the second half, King Gill stood right beside the coach. And he would say, "Coach, I'm ready. Send me in if you need me." And he stood beside the coach the whole game. That's how they developed a tradition at College Station that the student section will stand the whole game. They stand for the entire game to be the 12th man, to say to the team, "We're here," to say to the coach, "We're here, put me in if you need me." If, in a sense, it's that we get to be in the balcony for others. Now, despite all the things that happened in the Cotton Bowl this past year, I'll go ahead with that analogy, and we'll just use it that way. And we won't begrudge our fans down in Texas A&M who may have a little different season ahead of them this coming year, but we'll see. "Coach, if you need me, I'm ready. Put me in." We stand ready to be able to share that faith, to be able to pass it on to others in life. And it'd be a great joy for us when we see at the end of the course of our life, if there are others who we have influenced and been able to share faith with, that it's made a difference in their lives. It's part of the joy we get to share. As the flame torch makes its way around, for each of us to have a moment to be able to recognize what God has done for us and how God is calling us forward. We remember that we stand ready as those who carry the faith, stand ready to pass it on for all who have shared it with us And now we get to lead and share it in the life of others. It's your turn, church. It's your turn. And we don't want to let anyone down who's been a part of that in our lives. We want to be the kind of folks who take the responsibility seriously and who pass that faith on to others. That's our great joy. It's what we get to share and celebrate here today. Now, as we move forward in the service, we'll just continue to pass that around until it's made its way fully to everybody. Let it be our light that Christ has lit and burns in our lives that we share with others, and that Christ's light transforms the world. Amen.